Educational GMAT. Your partner in your GMAT journey.
Now, this is slightly tricky. I'm going to discuss this in significant detail, guys. Let's first understand this. Now, Mr. Jay, since you were looking for options, I would see if you can volunteer to explain what the argument is saying. Yes. Very nice. Very nice. There's a country, Ditrama, which has how many states? 3 states. Which are those 3 states? Korva, Metro, and Gwadar. Excellent. Go ahead.
Each region meeting is spread across their population pro rata.
Excellent. 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 So, what is the name of the country again? Ditrama. Okay. So, let us say there is a Ditrama which has 3 states, Korva, Metro, and Gwadar. Now, the mechanism that they have in place for federal revenue sharing is that the percentage of revenue that each state will get will be in what proportion? Absolutely, percentage of population. So, for example, if let's say there are 100 people, okay, 100 might be slightly confusing. Let us say that there are 50 people here, 30 people here, and 20 people here. Okay. So then percentage of revenue would be 50% of Ditrama's revenue would be given to A, 30% of Ditrama's revenue would be given to M, and 20% would be given to G. In other words, first thing that I want you to understand is that percentage revenue is a proxy for percentage population and vice versa. Both are exactly the same. Because whatever is the percentage population, that would be the percentage revenue also. Now, a funny thing happened last year. What was that funny thing? Numerically, so last year, right? So which means we are talking about last year and last to last year, right? These are the two years in comparison, right? So last year, what happened was numerically, Korva's population, numerically, did it increase or decrease? Numerically, Korva's population increased, but percentage-wise, Korva's population decreased. Why do I say percentage-wise Korva's population decreased? Because it's given that the percentage of revenues that Korva received decreased. And as we've discussed, percentage revenue is just a proxy for percentage population. So this is what I would call as a paradox. What was the paradox? That last year, numerically, Korva's population increased, but percentage-wise, Korva's population decreased. For this to happen, for what to happen? Numerical increase in Korva's population, but percentage decrease in Korva's population, which of the following must happen? That's what the question is asking for. Notice again, numerically, Korva's population increased last year, but percentage of Korva's population decreased. How do we know that? Because percentage of revenues of Korva decreased. Percentage of revenues of Korva decreased would mean that percentage of population of Korva decreased. Now, notice, since we are talking about percentages, then options that talk about absolute numbers are generally wrong. We discussed this, right? So alpha and David can be easily eliminated. Previous years, we anyway don't care. We are just talking about last year and last to last year. So I would say the only options worth discussing are Charlie and Edward. What's the difference, by the way, between Charlie and Edward? What's the difference? Sorry, no, what's the difference? What's the difference?
Charlie says that both of them.
Very nice. Charlie is saying that both M and G have to increase, while what is Edward saying? At least one has to increase. So do both have to increase or at least one? This is what we are debating. Sorry? The class is divided, guys, between Charlie and Edward. Do both have to increase as stated by Charlie, or does at least one? That's the debate. Well, the answer is at least one. Now, what I have on the next slide is, again, I have a table that is for explanation. And the table is quite intimidating, but don't worry, I'll explain it. Okay. Now, we are talking about last to last year and last year, right? So suppose last to last year, K, M, and G had 100, which means revenue allocation would be one third, one third, one third. Correct? Now, last year, according to the argument, what happened? Numerically, Korva's population increased or decreased? Increased. So let us say 100 increased to 102, which is a 2% increase. I have assumed that Metro's population remained the same and Gwadar's population increased from 100 to 110 by 10%. All right. Now, this being the case, can you tell me, by the way, how did I arrive at 32.69%? That would be Korva's population divided by total population, right? Total population, which would be 102 plus 100 plus 110, correct? So divided by total population into 100, that would give me 32.69%. Similarly, how did I arrive at 32.05, by the way? 100 divided by total population into 100. So that would give me 32.05. Similarly, how did I arrive at 35.26? 110 divided by total population into 100. That would give me 35.26. All right. Now, I want you to look at this table again. What does the argument say? Last year, what happened? Korva's population increased. Numerically, Korva's population increased, right? But percentage-wise, Korva's population decreased. Notice 33.3 is coming down to 32.69. Again, I am saying percentage-wise, Korva's population decreased. Why am I saying percentage population? As we discussed, percentage revenue is nothing but percentage population. They are a proxy of each other. For this to happen, for what to happen? Numerical increase in Korva's population, but percentage decline in Korva's population, the argument was saying, which is the following, must happen. Now, notice the case that I presented here is a violation of Charlie. Because Charlie said what? That for this to happen, both M and G have to increase. In my case, M is not increasing. What did Edward say? At least one has to increase. Absolutely, at least one. In our case, G has to increase. Now, there is just one more thing I would want to convey before we move on. Suppose that M had also increased. Let us say it had increased to, let's say, to 105. In that case, what would have happened? If you do the calculation, this would have come further down, right? M would have increased. So in other words, even if Charlie was correct, this observation would still have been true. But then the observation that is given in the argument is true even when Charlie is not correct. So in other words, Charlie can be true, Edward must be true. And in conclusion, we always talk about must be true. Yeah, Bharat. Good. Go ahead. Go ahead. Population of? Yes. Yes, correct. So if this is, let's take this, let's take this. So this is anyway 300 and this would be 312. Am I correct? Yes. So, so yeah, so for example, this 32.05, how did I arrive at? 100 divided by 312 into 100. Correct. So what's your question now, Bharat? If we go to the options, okay. Oops. Yes. Which option are you talking about? Edward, yes. Hmm. Hmm. Korva's population grew by a smaller percentage than did population of at least one of the other two autonomous regions. Yes, so that's correct, right? Because suppose that this had not happened. Let us say this was 101, Bharat. Let's say. Now tell me, Korva's population has increased by what percentage? 2, while this would be 0 and 1. In this case, this would actually be more. So then what is given in the argument would not hold true. Look, 100, you mean here or here? Last last year population. Okay, you mean this one. This is population last year. Oh, this is last to last year, by the way. 1 second. So instead of this, you want me to take this as 2. GS4, okay. All right. Then, 1 second, 1 second. Let's increase this to 6. Okay. And yeah, so actually, then this, in fact, would be 100%, 100%, right? So then also it will be true. Then also what will be true? Okay, once again, let's go back to Edward. Korva's population grew by a smaller percentage, which is exactly what this is saying, right? Korva's population increased by 2%, while the others increased by 100%. Right, Bharat. But what I'm saying is, let's, if we are taking these figures, 2 has increased to 6. Okay, that would be how much percentage increase, by the way? 200%, right? That would actually be 200% increase. And 4 increasing to 8 would be 100%. So, but that's what Edward is saying, Bharat. Because notice, these are obviously more than 2, which is what Edward is saying.